And we are very, very honored and very, very pleased to have with us Robert Watson, an award-winning author, professor, historian, analyst. He's published 36 books on history and politics, 5 works of fiction, hundreds of scholarly journal articles, book chapters, and reference essays. As an analyst, he's been interviewed thousands of times by media outlets, including CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, USA Today, the New York Times, NPR, and the BBC, Hardball with Chris Matthews, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. The list goes on and on and on. Robert Watson is a professor of American Studies at Lynn University and a senior fellow at the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship. And so we're very, very honored to have him with us. So now to present Krystallnacht, the truth behind the tragedy, I welcome my friend and associate, Professor Robert Watson. I'll see you after, Robert.
Good. Thank you, Avi. And thank you for the kind introduction. And mostly, I guess my bio should say I'm friends with Avi. So I had the pleasure of working with him. So thank you for joining us, everybody, on this important but solemn occasion. I've had the great honor of not only working with Avi on a number of events, but visiting Holocaust museums around the country to discuss Krystallnacht and to help train the staff to record oral histories with survivors from Krystallnacht. So I'm honored to be here today. I subtitled my talk, The Truth Behind the Tragedy, because with Krystallnacht, I find that there's a lot of misinformation that sadly, history often gets it wrong. Of course, Krystallnacht means the night of broken glass, or Crystal Night, November 9 and 10 of 1938. And it's named for the shards of glass that covered most cities across Germany. So I want to make 3 points with you today. I don't have a lot of time, so just 3 points. One is it's important to understand Krystallnacht within the larger context of Hitler's plans. Since Hitler rose to power in 1933, he had been gradually testing the world community. What could he get away with? What next steps could he take, and how would the world respond to it? He was itching for one big leap forward in his diabolical plan, and that would come in 1938 with Krystallnacht. Secondly, this horrific event is often presented inaccurately in history. Typically, a line in a textbook or in a newspaper story or a documentary will say it was a spontaneous uprising by a mob. No, far from it, as we'll learn in a moment. And thirdly, it's a turning point in the Holocaust. This is really where Hitler and Reinhard Heydrich and Hermann Göring and Joseph Goebbels take the next steps to the final solution. So the backstory of Krystallnacht begins in August of 1938. Hitler was testing the waters vis-a-vis immigration. He was labeling immigrants as threats to the country, as non-Aryan. He started restricting immigration, tried to arrest and cage immigrants. He started labeling everybody a foreigner. And then what he did was, in August of 38, they canceled residence permits for anybody deemed to be foreign. Now, this could be folks who had lived here for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, their entire lives. On top of that, he labeled German-born Jews as foreign. So even if you were Jewish and you lived your whole life, you were born in Germany, you were labeled as foreign. That was in August of 38. 2 months later, they acted. On October 27th, 1938, roughly 12,000 Polish Jews were rounded up all around Germany and were forcibly taken to train stations where they were forcibly loaded into cattle cars on trains. Now, each person was allowed to bring only one suitcase, and they had virtually no time to plan or to pack. Their homes, their possessions, their bank accounts, everything was confiscated by the Nazi Party. Part of this pogrom, and no other way to look at it than a nationwide pogrom, Hermann Göring saw it as a way that by stealing Jewish homes, bank accounts, assets, businesses, he could load them into Nazi Party coffers. So 12,000 Polish Jews are rounded up and put on the trains and taken toward Poland. One of them was the Greenspan family. Sendel, Riva, and their extended family. Now, they had lived in Germany since 1911. So it was really the home that many of their family members, the only home that many of their family members knew. They were taken to the Polish border. What happens is when they get to the Polish border, everyone is thrown out of the trains out into the open. No shelter, no roof. The Polish government then does not allow 8,000 of the 12,000 in, including the Greenspan family. So they were literally outside facing the elements. Of course, it's late October. It's getting cold. It was particularly rainy, so people were drenched in the rain. They have nothing. They have no food, and this is their plight. Now, while they're there, Sendel and Riva Greenspan sent their son Herschel. They sent him a postcard describing their plight. They said, "We've lost everything. We have no food. We're now homeless, living outside on the Polish border, suffering from the elements. If you have anything, could you please try to get it to us or send it to us?" So they sent a postcard. Herschel, the son, there he is on the left. He was about 17, and he was living in Paris with an uncle. Herschel is slightly unstable. He gets this postcard, and on November 7th, he goes and buys himself a revolver, and he buys a box of ammunition. He is bound and determined to exact revenge. When he reads about what happened, he goes to the German embassy in Paris and demands to see the ambassador. The ambassador is not available, so they have a minor diplomat. You see him on the right. His name is Ernst von Roth. Von Roth comes out to see what Herschel Greenspan wants. Greenspan shoots 5 bullets at him, misses 3, 2 hit in von Roth's stomach. Now, this is November 7th. Here's the bitter irony of this. Von Roth was actually secretly, as his letters came to light after the fact, was anti-Nazi, but Herschel Greenspan could not have known that. Von Roth is in critical condition. Hitler, Goebbels, Reinhard Heydrich, Goering, all the top Nazis hear this. They get an idea. This is the moment we've been looking for to take the next steps. The argument was this was not an isolated incident by an unstable young Jewish kid, a teenager, in response to his entire family losing everything they had and being dumped outside on the Polish border. No, what they said is this is a nationwide, if not continental-wide, plot, cabal by the Jewish community to take over Germans. Judaism over Germanism. Now, we need to remember that in German schools from 33 on, they had been teaching that Jesus was a Jew killer. That the Jews killed Jesus, I meant to say. And it was not an isolated incident by Herod or some Roman centurions. It was a Jewish plot to try to put down Jesus and any threats. It was also being taught that the plague in the 1300s, which killed roughly 1 out of 3 across Europe, it was caused by Jews, and the purpose of it was to eliminate non-Jews to take over the world. This Zog, this Zionist-occupied government conspiracy, this QAnon nonsense. The other thing they had been teaching was blood libel, that Jews wanted to kill good Christians to use their blood in making matzah or in Passover ceremonies. And this dates from the middle 1500s from a monk named Thomas of Monmouth, who blamed Jews for the disappearance of any Christians, saying that they were killing everybody. Therefore, any reprisal against Jews is justified. So having everybody been taught that in schools, hearing it on German state media, when Hitler heard of this incident, he said, that's it. We will say that Greenspan was part of a global cabal, a continental-wide cabal to kill Jews, to kill Germans, I'm sorry. So what happens is 2 days later, on November 9th, Ernst von Roth dies of his wounds. Hitler goes to the funeral. Now, the unlikely and tragic coincidence here is the day was the exact date of the 1923 uprising in the beer halls, which was a celebrated moment among those on the radical nationalistic far right. Hitler and his ilk, the Nazis, celebrated this as sort of the way Americans would celebrate, the shot heard round the world and, Lexington or Concord. So with that in the background, Hitler and the Nazis planned to have everybody take to the streets. It was not a spontaneous uprising. Joseph Goebbels, you're looking at on the left, who was the Minister of Propaganda and Public Enlightenment. Joseph Goebbels goes on the radio and announces that, Herschel Greenspan was part of a continental-wide Jewish conspiracy. They're going to attack the Germanic people. We need to rise up, and anything is justified. Reinhard Heydrich, that you're looking on the right, he was known as the Blonde Beast or the Butcher of Prague. He's one of Hitler's favorite generals. He's put in charge of the Czechoslovakia, which was so important because of the coal and natural resources to run the German war machine. He would end up being assassinated by resistance fighters from Britain, some Jewish resistance fighters, and some Czechs. The highest ranking person in the Nazi in the war to be assassinated. But he was one of Hitler's favorites. He then went to the beer halls where Germans are already drinking, are drunk, and are celebrating the 1923 event. And Goebbels and Heydrich told everybody to take to the streets and do your worst. So you can see it was planned. It was a pogrom. And Hitler had been waiting for the spark. And the killing of von Roth was the spark. Now, at that meeting on the 9th, Heinrich Himmler, who would be the head of the SS and Gestapo, and Hermann Goering, who was the head of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, they were actually against this pogrom of burning and destroying buildings. Why? Heinrich Himmler worried about the diplomatic impact. He thought that the world could turn against us because of the graphic images of all this. He didn't have a humanitarian concern about it, of course. He liked what they were doing. He was just worried about the diplomatic bad PR. Hermann Goering didn't want to destroy everything. He wanted to just round up and arrest all the Jews and steal everything. He wanted to use the money, buildings, businesses, and everything for Nazi party coffers. So the orders that came down from Joseph Goebbels and Reinhard Heydrich were to use the most extreme measures necessary. And I put that on the screen for you. Now, correspondingly, as part of this pogrom, is the police were told to stand down and allow SS, SA, jackbooted thugs, as well as drunk citizens to just attack any Jewish establishment, round up and arrest or kill Jews. The fire department was told to stand down and let it burn unless there was an Aryan home or business nearby. Then if it was threatened by the raging fires, only then could the fire departments come in and put it out. So police and fire stood idly by while this devastating event took place. The result, all across the country, not one or two cities, but all across Germany, nearly 300 synagogues were destroyed. Methodically, it might be said. Folks went inside, they gathered up scrolls, books, art, treasures, took them outside and piled them up in great funeral pyres, busted out the windows and set everything aflame. So nearly 300 synagogues. Nearly 7,000, it's estimated, Jewish homes, businesses, and schools were destroyed, burned, or looted during this. Tombstones were uprooted, graves were desecrated as skeletons were dug up and paraded around and strewn about the town or thrown into the fires. Ultimately, over 90, nearly 100, the numbers vary, but at least 91 Jews were killed in the Krystallnacht night. It started in the late afternoon of November 9th. It went all the way through the night into the wee hours of the morning on the 10th. Now, orders were sent down from Reinhard Heydrich to arrest young, healthy Jewish men, not women, not children, not older. And roughly 30,000 young, healthy Jewish men were arrested. They were taken to 3 concentration camps, Buchenwald, Dachau, and Sachsenhausen. And most of them would end up perishing in those 3 atrocious camps. Now, another program follows on the heels of the Krystallnacht nationwide pogrom. This is led by Hermann Goering, who you're looking at right there, the number 2 Nazi and the Luftwaffe commander, a World War I ace and hero. Goering, as I said a moment ago, opposed Krystallnacht because he didn't want to destroy all the businesses and synagogues. He wanted to use everything for Nazi party coffers. So he finally gets his wish. The Jewish community of Germany, get this, was collectively fined the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of Deutschmarks. Fined for being attacked. So the amount of money. Next, a double whammy. Instead of, if you lost your home or your synagogue or your business, instead of getting insurance money, the Nazi Party nationalized German insurance industries, and they took all the payments owed to the Jewish community and put them in Nazi Party coffers. So talk about a double whammy. Here's a description from Goring. Hitler then contacts Goring, Reinhard Heydrich, Joseph Goebbels, Heinrich Himmler, and others, announcing the success of Krystallnacht. It served his larger purposes. Now the Nazi Party can take the next steps and monitor the response to the rest of the world. Goring wrote of that meeting, "I have received a letter written on the Führer's orders requesting that the Jewish question be now, once and for all, coordinated and solved one way or another." Sadly, as was the case with Hitler's rise to power in 1933, as was the case with the Nuremberg race laws in 1935, which banned Jews from full enfranchisement and citizenship, prohibited Jews from certain occupations, academia, the law, the courts, medicine, and so on, and banned interracial marriages. Hitler was looking at the response by the world community, which was underwhelming in 1933, underwhelming in 1935. During the massive Nazi Party rallies in Nuremberg and elsewhere, he was looking for the response from the world. It was underwhelming yet again. The US did withdraw an ambassador, but most countries had very little to say about this. Hitler read this as a green light. The world will not get in my way. And therefore, after Krystallnacht, the second pogrom of confiscating everything, this is where they planned the next steps in what would ultimately be the Holocaust. The year after Krystallnacht, well over 100,000, maybe 120,000 Jews left Germany. They realized there was no future for Jews in Germany. The legacy of all this, Krystallnacht really put the Jewish community throughout Europe on notice. It put the German people on notice. It's time to pick sides. The Nazi Party intentions were now crystal clear. Maybe it was just a lull in 1935. Maybe it was just some rallies with speeches in intervening years. Now it was clear, and Hitler was taking the next steps. Again, let me reiterate, as is often inaccurately presented, it was not a spontaneous uprising. People were drinking in the beer halls. They were coordinated by radio, by dispatching Nazis across the country to go to beer halls and whip everyone into a frenzy. They were given instructions. Police and fire across the nation were given instructions. This was a coordinated attack, which was the next step in the Holocaust, an orchestrated nationwide pogrom. Greenspan's action was simply the excuse that Hitler had been waiting for. Herschel Greenspan was an insignificant 17-year-old, slightly disturbed teenager. Hitler went to the funeral in order to propagandize it. And again, testing the world's response, I'm sad to say, once again, the world failed and it green-lighted Hitler for the next step. And the proper way, I think, then to understand Krystallnacht is really as a prelude to the final solution itself. I want to thank Avi and his team, Amy and everyone, for organizing this event on this important day. I want to thank all of you for attending. And I also want to thank everybody, including Avi, for the privilege, the honor of being here to talk about this event and perhaps try to lay out the truth behind this momentous and tragic affair. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. The honor is ours to have you. And I realize, and we only have a couple of minutes before we have to go to our wonderful program about the great artist, Marty Levin, who is trying to recreate all of these destroyed synagogues in model form. And it's an amazing program. But I think it's so important that we emphasize that as the population of Holocaust survivors continues to diminish, and those include my parents, my father, who's gone 20 years, my mother, she should live to 120. There are so many, but they are fewer and fewer from year to year. So it becomes our responsibility, you know? And so
no question.
I think we have 1 minute
Okay.
About, can you just speak to the relevance to today and how do we learn from our history so we don't do it again?
No question. Well, that's the first day of any history class. We seem to never learn the lessons of history, and therefore we're doomed to repeat the mistakes of it. And Avi, you're right, for the words never forget and never again to have resonance. We need to remind every generation. We cannot assume that this generation coming of age today understands it. In fact, on college campuses, the boycott, divest, sanction movement, the Students for Justice in Palestine movement, it's alarming on campus. And when we're losing these survivors, it's our responsibility through programs like this, through folks like you, the next generation, to make sure they tell these stories. And I'll leave you with this. What's disturbing, and it should be a call to arms for all of us, the Brandeis Center, the Brennan Center, Southern Poverty Law Center, ADL, the FBI, every organization has documented in the last couple of years, there's been an unprecedented spike in microaggressions, synagogue desecrations, and attacks on the Jewish community. In the last couple of 4 years, there's been a corresponding unprecedented spike in membership in KKK neo-Nazi groups. So who would have thought it? Here we are in 2021 taking a step backward. So that should be all the more reason for events like this and for all of us to work together.
Okay, thank you, Robert.